Hi, and welcome back to the Kung Fu Book Review. Today we're going to be talking about a strange and interesting book by a strange and interesting man. We are going to be looking at none other than Dim Mak, Death Point Striking, by this guy. There's an even better photo of him in the back here. Yep, this is him, Erle Montaigue, who I would say is the sort of the crazy wizard hobo of Tai Chi that was found in the Australian outback. He is a really fascinating and interesting character. Erle was an interesting man who lived his own life. He sadly passed away recently, actually. He was a wrestler at one point. He was a musician, produced quite a lot of sort of country music, I think. You know, he's his own guy. But on top of that, he was a top-level martial artist who trained particularly in Tai Chi Chuan, right? So, but also Bagua and a few other bits and pieces. And really, he did his own thing, right? And I think this is the key thing with Erle and most of his books is they're very him, right? He's not like a lot of other people. He says things his own way, does things his own way. So what you get out of it is not the stereotypical view of Tai Chi in either, I would say, in either of the sort of modern formulations of Tai Chi that you expect. So either you get the sort of what I would call old lady in the park Tai Chi, which is very soft and yin and yielding, and it's all about health and well-being and all this in a huggy feeling. It's kind of like Aikido almost, you know, it's just, we're gonna, you know, just gently guide the opponent away, and pushing hands is just this dance. You even get it called that, the Tai Chi dance, you know. Or you get the kind of like the modern Chen Village stuff where it's like, yeah, it's about grappling and we're gonna do like really intense push hands and throw each other on the floor and, you know, and do all that kind of thing. But rarely do you get it that actually it's you know, it's specifically a fighting method that's designed to like poke people in all of their acupuncture points in their face and neck and like destroy them with lots of striking. And you know, the sort of the Yang family incredibly violent Tai Chi, which most people I don't think don't know about, but I mean, especially if you hear the reports from the Yang family and how Yang Luchan was to his sons, you can see that actually there's a deep lot of violence at the heart of Tai Chi. And I think Erle was one of the few people to really express that, and as you can see from this book. Now, in addition to this, so Erle has quite a confusing lineage, and we're not quite sure about where it comes from, but the skill and the movement quality and the knowledge was fantastic. So you're in this kind of interesting predicament as well, because the language and description that Erle uses a real mix of stuff, because he was in the era when he was mostly selling this sort of martial art Tai Chi to other martial artists, to Japanese martial artists. So he intermixes the Japanese terms like kata. He uses some Cantonese words, so like Dim Mak is Cantonese, but then all of his points are described by their Mandarin names. So there's like, you know, it was during this early era when a lot of these books, I believe the main purpose was because you were trying to keep people in your system, and then they wouldn't know how to translate between them. But also, I think there was also just a deep, not a lot of knowledge of mainland China and the different languages and ways of writing and speaking in China. So, and on top of that, he is also mostly teaching to guys that did karate and kempo. So you have this, and then you get all the Japanese terminology mixed in there. So this leads to a very confusing and weird terminology throughout the books that he writes. In addition, Erle's kind of stream of consciousness style of writing, whilst quite engaging at times, and I find his writing style is quite engaging, it just sort of leaps around from place to place as well. So it's similar to some other authors I've said, where the content is good, but if you're expecting a very layered, logical manual that's going to say, okay, we're going to train this and this, then you're going to be sorely disappointed. Now, what is this crazy book about? So what is Dim Mak? So Death Point Striking. So it's striking to acupuncture points, right? So there's particular ways of moving, striking, directions of hitting, and ways of applying force. So this kind of Fajin, explosive power, which is preferred in sort of internal martial arts, Tai Chi, Xing Yin, Bagua. And this book is essentially this. It also contains parts of Erle's system. So Erle, instead of writing his, and this is the other thing why his books are very confusing. So instead of writing, this is the Canon Fist form book, right? As you might see nowadays. So Canon Fist form and its applications, volume 1, volume 2, right? Logical, consistent. Oh, I know what I'm getting. I'm going to get this short form, and then I'm going to get the explanation, the theory, and its applications. Okay, makes sense, right? You end up with all sorts of bits of the system buried in amongst other lore. So this actually contains the circular dim mat palms, right? Which is this sort of like 10 or 12 exercises that sort of from Wudang boxing, which contain a bunch of different ways of moving, and you can also apply them with a partner. So they make little 2-partner exercises. So this is in here, right? But it's not explicitly said that it's in here. It's just kind of nested in the middle of the photos. So there's a very confusing way of presenting information. In addition, here's the worst possible offender of the text describing photos that are not on the same page. So in his defense, he will, rather than just, in these older books, like I mentioned, some of the other sort of really early black and white still, sort of the 60s, 70s, 80s books, as you get a little bit later on, sort of 80s and 90s, people realise that this is a terrible way to learn and teach martial arts. So instead you get the photo with a ton of text describing, then you move in this way, and the idea here is to break the balance, and you're going to apply this type of force and do this kind of thing. But then you reach a new problem, which is he's still talking about figure 22 here, all this page, and then when I'm looking at figure 23, I have to flick back to go back here and say, okay, what's he doing there? He's doing a double inside block, and then look over here, right? And then the names are not, so the names in the pages are not related. And sometimes you can be 5 pages out in his book, I think in this one in particular, because you get a lot of content, you get a lot of theory. So yeah, there's some really bad things about this book, but there's also some excellent stuff in this book. So you're going to need to, if you're a regular Tai Chi practitioner, you're going to need to transliterate what he's saying. And kind of figure it out. But there's a lot of really good theory in here. And also you're going to have to work hard reading the book to go back and forth between pictures. I actually think that I haven't really learned his forms and his sets from in there. I think it's better just to analyse the material and just digest it and think about it. Because some of the best sections of the books are the ones where there's no pictures, right? You're not trying to skim back and forth. So what's in the contents page? So we can have a brief look. The book is reasonably well structured. It has got appendices. He doesn't define his terms or describe how he's going to use the Chinese, which is really, I already mentioned it, a big hassle for this, because he mixes languages and Cantonese and Mandarin all over the place and never uses a character, never uses pinyin. And he's got some also, he does Q&As, but again, they're in some of the sections, but they're not highlighted and brought out. So some of the book presentation is not great. He also comes from this period where, this kind of litigation period where people were like, if you're writing martial arts books, you could genuinely get people killing each other. So you get all this content warning. Warning, the techniques and drills depicted in this book are extremely dangerous. It is not the intent of the author to encourage readers to attempt any of these techniques, even though definitely go do try them out with your training partners. But it's do not attempt any of these techniques or drills without the certification of etc. Right? So you get all this kind of stuff. I also think it kind of sells the book because it's like, look how super dangerous everything is. And this actually, I don't tend to bring attention to acknowledgement sections, but this actually says a lot about Erle, because it's kind of, he does everything in by himself. So his acknowledgement sections is thanks to Karen Porchett for her unswavering efforts to pound the most difficult manuscript into a readable book. That's it. Didn't get sent to any other martial artist, didn't have any other one checking it, didn't have a bunch of editors, just one person read it, bam, out it goes. So that kind of explains a lot about the, Erle and the way the books are. Gets a foreword by a karate instructor, because again, most of these books were being sold to karate practitioners. Now, where the book actually gets good is when we get into the preface, right? So, and he talks a little bit about what Tai Chi is, what Dim Mak is, or what the art of striking pressure points is, and how to move. And then this is the other point. So again, like in my videos where I mentioned about Bruce Francis, these guys that are deep Qi true believers, right? I am not, as I mentioned before, I'm kind of a Qi compatibilist. Like, I think that we have certain experiences, but there's not an underlying energy in the universe or this mystical force inside of you. I think this is a natural product of our biology, which we can measure, which leads us to certain synthetic experiences that we feel, right? So when we're training, those experiences are still the right things to guide us, but there's no magic, right? So unlike Erle, who's also worked alongside another acupuncturist to do a lot of the acupuncture, he's one of his top students, is a guy who is a practicing acupuncturist. He's full whack on the acupuncture internal stuff, and he's like, this point will activate at this time of day, and you've got to strike it this way and that. So counterclockwise in the morning and this other way in the afternoon, and this is where me and him sort of diverge. So as again, maybe, but I think this is a difficult area to really work if it's effective or not, and if it does it make a significant difference to martial arts? Probably not. In my view, anyway. But he was a much more sophisticated internal martial artist than I am, right? So maybe I've got a lot more to learn. So I don't know, but it does mean that when he starts talking about Qi and the sections on that, sometimes my eyes glaze over a little bit. So I take some of those bits with a pinch of salt, and I try and focus more on the theories and the principles of the movement and the fighting stuff, which I think he does a better job of explaining. And I always thought that his martial content was much better than his sort of healing content anyway, because it wasn't really what he was focused on, right? So so he gets a little introduction, and I think there's some really good stuff about the history of the Yang family in there. You get a list of all the points and what they mean and where they are. I mean, you could pull that straight out of an acupuncture manual. I recommend other books for that. So like The Web That Has No Weaver is a brilliant introductory book about the actual acupoints and how they work. And it's written by a Harvard medical professor who's also an acupuncturist. So I think there's better places to go for the points and what they do. But in terms of like which are the best ones to smash in an opponent, I think he does a good section. So the individual points and their functions, I don't care about what he has to say about the health benefits and stuff. I'm interested in stomach 9, like smash that, like on the heartbeat, like boom boom 1 2, because that's it's the vagus nerve that goes directly to the heart. So he has interesting things to say about the points and what to do to mess them up, right? I think all of the health and healing stuff could be better. The diagrams are okay, so he's extracted diagrams from acupuncture textbooks, and they're in the right place for each page, and the points are reasonably clearly visible. So you get these kind of images, right? And they're actually on the page where the thing is talking about. Most of the time, you might have to go 1 or 2 pages back. That bit is okay. Now, the best bit of the book, honestly, I think, is this next section where he talks about Fajin. So Fajin and how to use Dim Mak. This is another. Okay. So from page 35 to page 49, there's a really good section on Fajin, which is this explosive shaking power. Which I don't know, if you're not doing Chinese internal martial arts, this might be a completely alien concept, but the best way I can describe it is it's the way that the body moves when it's using all of its force and springiness across all of the planes, so it can shake. So a lot of, when I look at external martial artists by comparison, it's almost like they're producing something like a bench press in the air, right? So it's like block, punch, right? And the body is just, or it'll like turn on the hips like this. So you'll be like 1, 2, yeah? And the body is like this, is treated like a solid square thing that, can rotate under a couple of axes, so the hips can twist, and you can push forward and back, maybe you can turn out to the side, and the kicks go forward or to the side, and you get this, so it's kind of like how Newton views, Newtonian physics view the world. It's like billiard balls bouncing around. Everything is, the core has to be really strong. So they focus a lot on making that really dense and solid. Everything is rooted through that, and then there's a rotational hip movement and forward and back with the arms. And that's it, right? So, and that's how the human body moves. But actually, that's not accurate at all, because the human body's like really springy and soft and spirally, and we have all these joints that can move in like twisty ways, right? And we also have the thing called fascia, which is like this rubbery connective tissue that runs through us. And on top of that, some of our extremities are also controlled by tendons, which are like really springy, elastic bandy things. And our scapulars move in, all sorts of angles. So when you develop all of these things, you end up with this kind of whippy, springy power, right? That's really snappy. And that's basically my way of summing up what Fajin is, right? So it's training your body to move in all of those, to use all those other ways that isn't just like the prime big motor movers in the body, right? So, and you end up with this very different kind of force, which is, like snappy and whippy is the best way to describe it. So, and some of the best boxers have this kind of force, right? So, anyone who's got that kind of crazy knockout power, excepting maybe guys like, if you look at guys like George Foreman, that's loose heavy. That's just, he's just really dense, heavy, dropping the arms on them, which is also a cool form of power, by the way. But yeah, if you look at someone like Tyson, right, he's got this like his waist moves and the whole body like snaps, and he can even spring from one foot to the other, and when he touches the ground, it bounces off and springs into the next one, and the punches are like crack, like a whip, yeah. That's whole body power, like Fajin, right? And it's sort of round and synthetic, and it moves all as one unit, and it's not blocky or slow, yeah. So that's the kind of force that you're looking to generate by doing Chinese internal martial arts. Now he moves on to this next section, how to use Dim Mak, and then just includes these 4 what I call he calls dragon prawn, but like if you look at the Mandarin there, so Long Sha Chuan, dragon prawn boxing, that would be lobster boxing. Long Sha is a dragon prawn is a lobster, right? So again, we don't even know, because I don't think he was a Mandarin speaker. So when he was given those words, he kind of just transliterated it. So and he's got this. So he's put these kind of like 4 drills that you can do with a partner, which kind of help you develop some of the way of moving, and they're kind of easy for a beginner to use. I quite often do them. So as soon as people start learning Tai Chi, and if they want to learn it for fighting, I introduce them to these drills really early on, because they're going to get that. They're going to get to develop that feeling of loose, heavy contact with a partner, and get that, being soft and springy and loose is going to work, and it's not going to take 5 years for them to break down their habitual habits. They can just pick this up and get the idea in their head that relaxation and softness and circular movement is going to help them develop this force, and they can get it quite quickly. So it's a cool series of drills. He doesn't tell him, oh, here's a section in the book. It's just in the section on like how to use Dim Mak, which it really isn't that. It's a whole separate thing. So again, interesting information, confusing presentation. Yeah, and that takes up loads of room, because yeah, after he finishes that, he goes straight into the small sansao, which is kind of the next stage from that, which is like, it's a small, again, I would call it sanshu, so small free hands exercise, sansho. So small free hand exercise, yeah, shao, sham, shao, shao, God, Mandarin is struggling today. Anyway, small freehand exercise, right? So it's like a small fast form that you can do and then also do with a partner. Again, that you get another 20, 30 pages of that, and it's not in the contents page at all. Then you get a huge section on what the points are, a big section on multiple strikes, which is, as I mentioned, that's the key. That's those sort of 10, 12 dim mat palm techniques, which he goes through in quite a lot of detail. This is probably a section that's really difficult because, again, each picture. So let's say here, this is a good example. So we're in sort of page 145, circular hand technique 4. You know, all of those 1, 2, 3, 4 images of this correspond to that one block here. And then when you go on to the next one, it's on the next page. When you go on to the next one, it's on the next page, right? So, you know, on this page is on picture 132, which is 2 pages on from there, which makes it very, very difficult to read and work out what's going on. And it overflows to the point where you've got tons of images left over at the end of the chapter. Now, I said that the healing section, you know, what he says about the healing parts of dim mak are not so good, but I caveat that by saying some of his information about Qigong and standing meditation is excellent. So at the beginning of this, he has a section on 164 where he talks about Qigong and describes standing meditation, a couple of different hand postures, and also this brilliant pose, which is one of the best martial Qigong poses that I know, called holding the baby. So where you're lightly suspending the front hand. So it's a very yin pose, and I use this extensively when I'm teaching. So if people want to learn a standing meditation for martial arts, this is one of the first, after the basic embracing the tree or mother posture, this is one of the first ones that I teach them, alongside Santi posture from Xingyi, because that Santi is very, very yang, and this is the yin counter posture, and I use the two of these together. So yeah, really good stuff there. And then actually my favourite bit of the book, which if you're into conversations with old masters, which I totally am, it's kind of worth the price of admission just to get this, which is his teacher. There's this guy, Chang Yu Chun, and he's got a short interview with, you know, what he thinks with martial arts. It was basically Erle asking him questions, and his sort of teacher, like, he comes across as this grumpy old master. He's like, doesn't even like answering the questions, right? And it's great. It's like 5 or 6 pages of this dialogue, and I won't spoil it for you, but you know, you get like you know, so Earl's like, you know, tell me more about this, and he's like, I've already told you about that, and then he's like, okay, we'll move on to the next section. So it's yeah, it's very. It brought a smile to my face anyway. So, and I enjoy these rare moments of sort of older Chinese masters when they just they're kind of in like don't give a shit mode, right? They're just going to say whatever they're going to say, and that's great because I think that's something that's sorely lacking from a lot of. You know, if you see a lot of other non-Taoist Chinese martial arts masters, they're very serious people. You know, with they've got that Confucian standard about how to act and how to be. But some of the other guys, they're either like T.T. Liang, and they're like these practical jokers, or they're just these guys that they'll just say anything. You know, and they'll just say whatever's on their mind. They're just like, shut up, that's stupid. You know, like, and so seeing Earl get shot down by his teacher when he's trying to say things in this, and he's published it, is great. So I really enjoyed that. And then he's got a few appendices at the back with some extra applications. I quite like the bit at the back where he goes through each. He basically kind of lays out in a table some of the stuff that was in the earlier chapter about the points and their applications. So let's look at stomach 9. So just to say it's one of the main points. So it's just along the side of the neck where the vagus nerve is. So stomach 9, one of the main points along the carotid artery. And then how to hit it. Straight back towards the back of the head. Fingertips are best, but fist. Again, mixing Japanese terms here, shuto, which means the knife edge of the hand, right? are all possible. Can be combined with pericardium 6 in the distal direction, so pulling away. So this is very common, right? So if you pull the pericardium 6 on the wrist, and then what happens is people stick their neck out, right? And then you can whack into the neck, yeah, at the same time. So yeah, so I think this section, this appendices at the end, is, I mean, this is actually how I would really present this information. So rather than the longer section, but I suppose the diagrams are good in the earlier part. But anyway, good here that they finished off with this. And then you get a little bit about the author and some of his other books and bits and pieces. And this fantastic photo of Erle being an old crazy wizard. So yeah, Erle was an interesting character. He wrote quite a few books. I will review more of his books, but the theme is pretty consistent. So I don't really know if I can recommend them if you're not training in the sort of the old Yang system, which now his son is sort of the lead on it. There's quite a few other people around the world that have trained this style of Tai Chi. So yeah, if you're doing any other style of Tai Chi, it's like maybe, but you're going to have to wade through the confusing terminology and the sort of stream of consciousness style of writing. It also commits quite a few of the sins of, as I mentioned, the pages and photos not lining up, and as well as being kind of disorganized, and you don't really know what you're getting in the book, because this book has like 3 short forms in it. So really the title could be, the short forms and partner training methods of Tai Chi plus some Dim Mak, if it was a more accurate title. So yeah, it's a hard sell, some of Erle's books. If you're training in the old Yang system, or interested in doing this type of Tai Chi with its focus on Fajin and explosive striking, then it's a definite. Like, I think you should get his books, because it's worth putting up with the pain of wading through this stuff to find the diamonds in the rough. And there are real diamonds in there. He was a proper master level practitioner, and there's good penetrating insight, really good little nuggets of hints and tips about Qigong practice, how to strike, how to move. But you've got to wade through a lot of other text to find those nuggets. Yeah, good. As always, please like, share, and subscribe. I wish you all the best with your practice, and see you all very soon.